academic article, we are presented with a definition. And in my opinion, it's very important to include that definition when you are summarizing your task. And I advise you, when you're mentioning that definition, to offer it in the present tense. So, for example, if I am introduced to the concept of something called choice supportive bias, and it's my turn to give my response and summarize that, I might say, for example, choice supportive bias is when people make a decision and they tend to view this decision or this choice in a very favorable way. So I offer my definition in the present tense. Now, when we think about lecture number 4 and lecture number 6, we often are introduced to a topic and then the professor provides us an example. And sometimes the professor will provide us an example that is a simple fact or truth about the concept he or she is trying to illustrate. When we are presented with facts or truths, we should summarize them in the simple present tense. So here's an example of a portion of a lecture on the topic of carnivorous plants. Carnivorous plants capture insects in different ways. They have different trapping mechanisms, active traps and passive traps. A plant with an active trap, a good example is the Venus flytrap. The Venus flytrap actually moves to catch its prey, or parts of it will anyway. Its leaves have special that are hinged in the middle, and the two halves of the leaves open and close, sort of like a mouth, to catch insects. And on these leaves is a sweet nectar that attracts insects. Insects like this sweet stuff, and they would get lured in and land on the leaf, and wham! The leaves spring shut. It's an active trap, and the insect springs it, so to speak. Okay, so there's a portion of a lecture that you might hear. So if I were to summarize that portion of the lecture, I'm going to use a lot of simple present tense verbs because what I've been presented with are a lot of general truths and facts about carnivorous plants, and in this case, the Venus flytrap. So for example, here's a snippet or a portion of what my response might sound like. So basically, the lecture describes active and passive traps. The professor offers a crystal clear example of an active trap when she describes the Venus flytrap. This plant's leaves have the special ability to open and close, like a mouth. Inside, they produce a delicious nectar, which entices insects to come inside. When the insects enter the Venus flytrap's mouth, it snaps its leaves closed and traps the insect. So if you noticed, I used a lot of simple present tense verbs to illustrate those general truths and facts that were presented to me in the lecture. But I want to show you a different perspective here. Sometimes the professor is going to illustrate the concept or phenomenon by telling a personal story or offering an example of something in the past. So in this case, when you have to summarize, you must summarize it using the past tense. Again, I'm going to read you a portion of a transcript. This is a sample check from my job at the office. I'd save as much of the money from it as I could after I bought the basic stuff I needed. But with the money I made as a waiter, that was another story. Somehow, I guess that money seemed separate from the money I earned at my regular job. So I used the money I made at the restaurant to go out to dinner, to buy videos and CDs, things I didn't really need. But the thing is, it ended up taking me a really long time to save up all the money I needed to buy a house. Okay. So this is a personal story from the professor's past. And because it's from the professor's past, in my response, I must summarize it using past tense verbs. So here's an example of how I might summarize that portion of the lecture. The lecture introduces the topic of mental accounting. which is the tendency for people to mentally separate their money into different accounts, which is an ineffective way to save. The professor illustrated this concept by telling a personal story. He explained that when he was younger, he had 2 jobs. He diligently saved the money he earned from his traditional office job. However, he foolishly wasted the money he earned from his restaurant job. Ultimately, it took him much longer to save enough money for a down payment on his first home. So if you noticed there, when I began that portion, I offered a definition of the concept of mental accounting, and I defined the term in the present tense. But then when I gave the example that the professor offered, I described it in the past tense because this was an example from the professor's past. Occasionally, we might hear the professor offer an example of something that happened thousands of years ago. Again, it would require you to use the past tense. So I just want to draw your attention to that special fact. I'm going to glance over at the Facebook page and see if there are any questions for me now before we wrap this up. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I'll take this opportunity to remind you of our services. Please click on the link and check out our website. The TOEFLspeakingteacher.com can save you a lot of money and aggravation. We know that the TOEFL exam is extremely challenging, and I work with students every day who are so pleased that they sought out some professional help and guidance, because it helps them feel much more prepared and confident to take the exam. So if you're interested, you can check out a speaking evaluation to find out your strengths and weaknesses on the TOEFL exam to help you achieve your goal or 26 or higher. Furthermore, you might want to develop your fluency by taking fluency classes, building your vocabulary and confidence in speaking English. We also offer group and private TOEFL lessons and have very professional teachers and a lot of accommodating schedules. So I hope that you'll check out our services, and I look forward to the next time that I get to share a TOEFL topic with you. All right, thanks for tuning in. Bye.